friends, we launched SECMOL, the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh, and said enough is enough. Working with the government, we rewrote many textbooks, retrained the teachers, and organized the villagers. And the results started changing too. For those who still failed, we started the alternative school that you just saw. And the results? Tewan Rigzin went on to become a top journalist and later became the education minister of Ladakh Hill Council at 27. He had failed his 10th grade 5 times. Stanzin became a filmmaker and has been winning awards across countries. He had failed 4 times. Miss Tinless is today a celebrated social entrepreneur. She had failed 3 times. But now we see that the state of higher education is no better. Not only for Ladakhis, who of course are doubly disadvantaged again, but for you in the big cities too. It's time we change this. We in Ladakh are dreaming again. This time our dream is to create an alternative university that will use all our learnings from the past 25 years. Once again, a hands-on doers university, where the School of Business runs real-life companies on campus. The School of Tourism runs high-end hotels and simple homestays. The School of Education runs innovative schools. The revenues from these sustain the university while the students get free higher education and of course hands-on experience. But this is more than a dream now. His Holiness Chetan Rinpoche, one of the top spiritual leaders in Tibetan Buddhism after His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is supporting this cause as the chief patron. The Hill Council government of Ladakh has earmarked roughly 200 acres of land, and the Ice Stupa artificial glaciers have already started greening this desert. A fully solar-heated, mud-built university township is being planned by some of India's top architects. Together, let's start the next learning revolution, where education is not limited to just the 3 R's, all too much to do with the head alone, where skills of the hands and kindness of the heart are given equal importance. Sure, it would take significant financial resources to materialize this ambitious dream. Recently, I was awarded the prestigious Rolex Award for Enterprise for the Ice Stupa artificial glacier.
Sonam Wanchuk.
I contribute my Rolex Award as a seed for this cause. Thank you very much. I have decided to contribute the roughly 1 crore rupees as a seed fund to finally raise 150 crore rupees for the first phase of the project. And I very much hope that you all will join me and match this contribution according to your capacities. Together, we can change the face of higher education forever, not just for Ladakh, but for the whole world. So join us. The future has already begun.
Hello. Good morning. Live registration conference with the highlight live trailer.
Jule everyone. I hope you saw what the 3R to 3H means. A lot of you had some queries.
Sure.
We'll quickly go through the agenda for today. If you can take a look at the goodie bag that has been given to you, there is an agenda. I just projected them. No, I didn't. Anushri. Agenda. Shared, no? We'll quickly go to the second page first, which is mostly for participants. On day two, we have a site visit from, from IR 8:30. First of all, I'm amazed and like really happy that everyone is here on time. Inspired? Yay! So to be on time, this is a very tightly packed day that we had, and we have tried to do something new and interesting. We'll go into that little later. Lily, can you go to page 2? Yeah. So on day 2, which is tomorrow, we'll start. There will be no sitting at Hayal. We'll start. We'll leave at Hayal. From Hayal, a bus will leave to Saspol Khar, Saspol Palace. It's a 1500-year-old building. We'll see how this region that we have seen survived 1500 years ago with whatever it had, the real carbon neutral living. That will take some time. Reaching there will take some time. Staying there will take some time. And then we'll move to a place called Uletokpo. It's a hamlet of 4 to 5 houses, which is a village in itself. And there we'll see a modern energy efficient and ground earth building. So living with the sun and earth. Then we'll have some panel discussions on financing and policy incentives on active heating through heat pumps. Again, some panel discussion on training and capacity building and a valedictory session. If you go to page 1 now, so there will be a welcome speech followed by a keynote speech by Mr. Sonam Mamchuk, and there will be a quick presentation of the research findings of the last 2 years done by Hayal, Gen 3 buildings, and further the steps ahead. There will be a speech by the SBC India head talking about international cooperation and knowledge sharing opportunities. It will be followed by a stakeholders discussion in which each table we have tried to seat you so that there are participants as well as guests in each table so that you can discuss upon, deliberate, and there's a special surprise for everyone. If you open this, I don't know, ID card, I don't know what, actually, there's a surprise for you inside. Please do. So students vision of a Ladakh, which is today, and a Ladakh that will be tomorrow. That is a student, someone imaginative. Now, the next page is blank. That page, we have given you pens and pencil. You have to use your imagination and come up with ideas of what is your idea of a carbon neutral Ladakh. That will happen right before the stakeholders discussion, so that we have thought a little before starting giving suggestions. Each table will get an A4 paper, and we will take six, not more than six recommendations from each table of what you think should be the way forward for a carbon neutral Ladakh. If then we'll have passes for the heating, we progress over the years. Then we'll learn few things from Himachal Pradesh, how they did what they did 20, 30 years ago, what were their learnings, and how can we learn from them and not repeat the same mistakes and improve on them. Then we will go into a little more technicalities, comment about survey and findings. That will be followed by some more presentation. But parallelly around that time, that reminds me, I think everyone should put their phones on silent, including me. We'll have a parallel public session and an indoor session going on. The public session is so that this session that we are doing does not stay within closed doors and ends up a lot like a lot of conferences, but we give a platform where the public can interact with and the experts can see and listen to what the public actually wants. So we have some parallel sessions going on. While we have the indoor session of simulation of PSS buildings and panel one going on, there will be an outside tour happening for the outside public, which will go for around higher buildings. That will be followed by us going out for a higher buildings tour, and then we'll join the public in the amphitheater, and then the session will start in the amphitheater. There will be a town hall session, an open session where local representatives, local stakeholders will be at the center stage, talking and interacting with everyone. And then there will be a plan declaration, probably the recommendations that will come up in those discussions are jotted down and then launched as plan declaration. Plan's recommendation of a carbon neutral Ladakh. That would be followed by some formal inauguration of some of the energy positive buildings, some prototypes that have been tested and vetted over the years so that the outreach happens. It will be followed by a very cool cultural performance by the local MLAs and participants, and we'll close for the day. Yeah, yeah. Very good. I hope everybody will come up with some idea of their carbon neutral level.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Gitanjali, the co-founder, CEO, and Dean of Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, the university in its fledgling state in the beginning, state stages of which we are seated right now. Almost 100 years ago, I think in 1931, just before he died, Thomas Edison said that I am a believer of solar energy. Let us use that before we rip our earth of all kinds of fossil fuels. It's been almost 100 years, but I guess we are still learning. We haven't mastered the art of befriending the sun, of drawing our energy from it, of living renewably, sustainably, and regeneratively. There are several pillars on which this university is being built, and as we go along the day, we will be introducing them to you. The first one is that this would be a contextual university. It would address the needs of the context. It would empower the local youth to solve its local problems using as much as possible local resources, innovations, and interventions. And the biggest contextual need of Ladakh is housing. With temperatures going up to minus 30 in winters, people who can afford it either leave it to go to Jammu or Goa, where they spend most of their money that they had earned during the summer months, or those who cannot afford stay back and either are uncomfortable or they're using bukharis and other fossil fuels which have high carbon monoxide in the rooms that they live in health wise. It's not easy. So the first issue that Himalayan Institute of Alternatives Ladakh thought to tackle was shelter. And the conference today is a culmination of not just the 2 years of a study which we undertook with in association with TERI and FNHW, the Swiss University funded by Swiss Development Corporation. It is actually the last 40 years of the effort Ladakh is making to make its housing comfortable for its people while being good for the environment. So, in contextual education, the youth are being trained to make the buildings that you are here in this conference hall. It is being scaled up, and we will go through the other processes and other pillars of HIAN. And today's conference is to scientifically, through the last 2 years, almost 2.5 years of the study that we have undertaken, to measure the temperatures, the carbon, the humidity of these buildings vis-a-vis the other buildings which are not passive solar, and how to then use this data for advocacy so that it can be mainstreamed. So as Rohit was saying, we are going to have all the stakeholders today, including the local people of Ladakh, the councillors, and experts from all over the world like yourselves to deliberate on this, to work on what we've already done, to use your experience and help in how we can take it forward. And we are all here co-learners and co-teachers. We all bring a rich experience here. And with a big round of applause, I welcome you all to this conference. Maybe. Thank you very much for making it and from all the corners of the world. And I now invite Sonam Wangchuk to deliver his keynote. Sonam Wangchuk is the founder and director of Himalayan Institute of Alternatives. He founded SecMol long back in the 1930s, 30 years ago. The work that has been done in SecMol on Earth architecture is being upgraded, upscaled, and taken to all across Ladakh and other Central Asian countries. And he would now share his journey and also the way forward. Mr. Sonam.
Julie, and a very good morning, all the participants from different parts of the world, and of course India and Ladakh. As Gitanjali mentioned, we are expecting participation from villagers to local people to the Hill Council and the Union Territory Secretariat to share and some of the findings and to look up to a future which is sunny, which is clean for Ladakh. And it's not just today that we are doing some studies and some advocacy for solar and passive solar in Ladakh. It has been happening for decades, definitely, as we'll be sharing soon and later in the conference. But I would say it's been for centuries that our ancestors in Ladakh have been very conscious of the sun that shines, and that perhaps is the only source of energy for a desert like Ladakh. So if you look at folklores, it's full of stories and songs, particularly about the grace of the sun and the warmth of the sun. Almost all songs, half the songs in Ladakh start with Nima Sharna Shari Kunjana Nima, praise of the sun, the mighty warm sun. So people here have been very gratefully aware of the energy of the sun. And I doubt it is a coincidence that we see all the towns and villages, some of which were capitals in the past, are located on the south-facing slopes of the Ladakh range. That again shows their awareness of the sun, even though they didn't have material like glass, transparent materials, or the knowledge of thermodynamics or solar heating, yet they did what they could. And one of these is that whether it is Shea Palace or Shea, which was the capital of Lachen Palgibon 1,000 years ago, or Leh, which is still the capital, uh, and the palace there built some 400 years ago, or Basgo, which was also once a capital some 500 years ago. All of these are on south-facing sunny side of the mountains. Or Tingmosdam, again, which was a capital for some time. So you can see the Ladakh range, the southern face of the mountains were what people chose, and that also speaks of this initiatives in solar energy back thousands of years ago. We carry it forward in modern times with all the science and technology. And in passive solar heating of houses, Ladakh, I think, in the recent times, in the last decades, has been a pioneer, at least in the Himalayas and India, perhaps globally also, with the help of many international experts and agencies. Ladakh has been quite ahead of the curve in many environmental activities, from solar to waste management. If we talk of um, banning single-use plastic today, then Ladakh did exactly that in the mid-90s, and it still goes on with the initiative of the mothers in the villages who saw their animals dying because of plastic. Uh, People all together with the NGOs coming together stopped using single-use plastic in the mid-90s. Similarly, in the 70s and 80s, initiatives on using the sun as a source of energy had started. And today we remember contributions of people like Chamanlal Gupta ji, who has been involved in several initiatives in solar energy and solar housing in Ladakh. Similarly, Ladakh Ecological Development Group with Helena Norberg's initiatives, or JERES with my friends Paul and Robert Celia, were in the 80s promoting solar, uh, passive solar heated houses. Much later, the Ladakh Environment Health Organization LEHO took initiatives in solar, using solar in their own uses and in villages that they work. Parallelly, at Setmol Alternative School, which is tucked away and somewhat away from the rest of the world, we started using solar energy very early. From early 90s, the campus at Bay, which some of you have visited and some of you may visit, was developed fully as a solar heated campus and built out of mud, natural materials, low energy, low carbon materials like earth, and powered completely by the sun. This perhaps was one of the first, or the first, fully solar powered zero energy or energy positive campus in India or the world. Doesn't matter, but it benefited from the sun from that early on, when terms like zero energy and off grid were not even coined. This school happened to choose this path, not because it wanted to be the first this or first that, but just because it made sense. In a place like Ladakh, where you have scarcity of every other fuel. In fact, I grew up seeing many elders cursing Ladakh, looking at the ground and saying, we have nothing in this soil like oil or other energy resources. We have nothing on the mountains like Kashmir has, or oil like Middle East has. And of course, our gift was up in the sky, shining brightly, and yet we were looking elsewhere to find our gift. So we chose it more because it made sense in a place that had no other resources of energy, very, very little, and had abundance, total abundance of this resource, solar energy, more than almost any place in the world. And yet we were not using that. It was like a joke or a crime, I don't know. A place that doesn't have anything else and has the most in the world of something that shines so generously, so abundantly. free of cost for everyone, rich or poor, and yet not so much was being used back then. So it was just natural that we chose solar energy for the campus, and we then studied what various agencies that I just named had been doing. We chose the best of what they had done, used our own experience as users of what works, what doesn't work, and developed buildings that could be fully autonomous, that needed no heating other than just the sun in a place like Ladakh. So at this SECMOL campus for the last 30 plus years, we have not used any fuel other than sun to heat in the winters, starting with what we call first generation buildings, which would stay between +5 to +10 degrees in the mid peak winters. And we always thought that the solution was not in making our rooms and our environment +22. That would be some kind of extravagance because it would cost so much. So we always thought that it has to be a middle path of improving our environment and reducing our demands, desires, and wants. So coming down from a +22 luxury to something like +15 was our aim, and raising the environment from what not normally other houses would be at -5 in the winters indoors to +15. So somewhere there should be the golden middle path where human beings can coexist with nature without harming one another. So our first generation buildings were more between +5, 6 to 10. Then the second generations were better and improved with better understanding of design and materials to take it to +10 to 15. And around then, we started conceiving the idea of a higher engagement in research and development and dissemination. That would be difficult for a school to do, and therefore HIAL, the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, which hopes to become an alternative university. What you're seeing are the beginnings of a lofty vision, but the very early beginnings of that. Here we wanted to go deeper, more than what a school can manage, and do research and development of these technologies to make it more comfortable for people. At school, we would make up for what the buildings couldn't with better clothing and so on. But for its acceptance at a scale, we needed to better it further so that people would find it naturally quite comfortable and not ask for more than the solar heating. So therefore, for the last 4 years or so at this institute, we have been doing more engaged, more scientific investigation and studies. And around that time, it was a very good opportunity that we could collaborate with agencies like FHNW from Switzerland, Terry from our own country, and supported by SDC, the Swiss Development Corporation, to properly study it and find a path of mainstreaming the same. We had started building houses which were designed to test different techniques. So you will see today, and you'll be taken on tours, these buildings that were set like lab models to be compared and studied, and then inferences could be shared. 4 of these in different materials, but in the same design. Materials from ancient primordial, from rammed earth, thousands of years old, to adobe, which is being used by most of Ladakh today, sun-dried bricks, to new materials or rediscovered materials that we are now promoting, like straw and clay mix that are lightweight and insulating. All these were tested in these buildings so that we could study it. We tried to see what was stopping its mainstreaming and found that uh, agencies like government needed to comply with their codes and therefore could not build in mud in vernacular ways that we were doing. So therefore we developed specimens or models of how, while complying to codes with all the frame structures, we could still make buildings passive solar. Today, I welcome the executive councillor from the Hill Council of Ladakh, Ladakh Autonomous Hill Council. Um, so I was giving an overview of the need and the path that Ladakh has taken in using solar energy stuff. Um, so at this campus, we have been studying these, and it was great that we could be doing it more formally with the help of the agencies I just mentioned. And now we are in a position to share data that we collected through this study, while at the same time the supply side of buildings was quantified or studied. We also, during this project of the research in the last 2-3 years, we studied what was the demand side in a place like Ladakh by doing an extensive survey to find the thermal comfort in a place like Ladakh. My colleague Rohit will, I'm sure, share more about it. So it is this culmination of this study that we wanted to share with people from different fields of life, because we are at a time when such findings would have a great contribution in chalking the way forward for Ladakh. Today, Ladakh is a union territory and therefore can make its own policies, norms, and bylaws. And it's very opportune moment for us that it is a UT. At the same time, we have the Prime Minister declaring Ladakh as a carbon neutral region, which has been a blessing because what made sense and what yet was difficult to advocate has suddenly become much easier. So we very much hope that both the Union Territory of Ladakh and the Hill Council would do everything to find a path that is world leading, actually, which is possible in Ladakh, rather than we become unlikely example of a place that uses everything else and not what it has. So much work has it needs to be done in the field of carbon neutral Ladakh on ground, and that has to be backed with clear policies from the government here. It has to be white in codes and bylaws. Unfortunately, it's now 3 years and we still don't have clear policies. So we are a little late, but I'm sure we are on the right track because there is a lot of interest in promoting solar as a serious source of energy in Ladakh. In a study by Ladakh some 10 years ago, it was seen that roughly 90% of energy need in Ladakh was in heating and cooking, mostly heating. And yet we always talk about photovoltaic solar energy, which would be a very costly alternative to make electricity and then heat buildings, whereas heating of buildings, which is like of the 90%, major chunk is heating, which can be done passively directly from the sun with much higher efficiencies and much lower costs, needs to be understood. So these need to go into the codes, otherwise we'll end up making mega giga photovoltaic plants and not understand what the people actually need in a cold place. Similarly, I mean, leave aside going into fine details of what norms and codes should be for a place like Ladakh. We are in a stage where Ladakh is not even recognized as a cold and sunny place. We are put in the category of cold between the different climate zones of hot and humid and cold. Ladakh is blessed to be cold, yes, but cold and sunny. Yet, if the codes don't understand that, then they'll spend all their resources into making highly energy efficient buildings, but without using the sun. And that is what we are seeing in many landmark buildings, including the Leh Airport, which just does not recognize that it is in one of the places in the world which has 300 sunshine days. So unless we have such things in the right place of understanding where Ladakh is, we won't be making use of the blessing that we have. We'll be treating Ladakh, to just say Ladakh is in the cold category is to say it is a climate like in northern Russia or Canada, where they have to do a lot of climate unfriendly technologies to keep their rooms at plus 20 or plus 22. Whereas Ladakh, in the past few decades, we have been showing that it is possible to make this place as warm and comfortable as anywhere else, but without damaging the environment. As I said, our aim was to get to the third generation of buildings where we will be between plus 18 and plus 25 using nothing but solar energy. So we are very close to that at Hayal, and that's why we wanted to study these buildings. These buildings, irrespective of the material, whether we use rammed dirt or adobe or straw clay, were almost in the same range. Actually, literally, the Hindi 19-20 ka farak, which is comfortable anyway in degrees. So, material was not the most important feature. Design was, and strategic planning is what we saw. And these buildings have been in between go solar in a big way. And mind you, with army, you can imagine more than 100,000 troops. And according to the oil companies, I was doing a rough calculation. 500,000 tons of CO2 is emitted in this area if you convert the oil that comes here into CO2, output. So that much is the extent of possibility of saving the environment, carbon emissions. And we would like the Indian Army to lead the way to be followed by the Chinese army on the other side, because when it comes to comfort, it's human beings on the both sides, and when it comes to environment, borders, pollution doesn't see any borders. Pakistani army to go carbon neutral. And if this happens in the Himalayan region itself, several million tons of CO2 emissions would be saved. And in Ladakh itself, roughly 1 million ton would be saved. So that is the hopeful scenario for which we have to mainstream this technology, and we've been doing a little bit of our part, and we have many experts from around the country, and I shared already that it is with such help and support that Ladakh has made some pioneering steps. We have Sanjay Prakash ji also here, who has been involved, like I talked about the other agencies. He, as a freelance, worked with various agencies, including the government, to introduce solar features, and he'll be sharing some of his experiences later. So we are blessed to have many such experts here, and some of them not here, to support Ladakh for these decades. And we hope in the coming years also, all the people of the world will help Ladakh tackle climate change, because we are also one of the foremost victims at the frontier of climate change. So Ladakh definitely needs all support in carbon emission mitigation like these, and adaptation. But for now, we are more into energy, so more in the mitigation realm. So I look forward to a very engaging interaction among people who have been working here in Ladakh and people who have come from other parts of the country and the world. People of the villages and the town, together with the government, to find our way forward in this time of climate crisis. I welcome you once again, and I look forward to engaging more deeply with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sonam Wangchuk, for chronicling the journey of passive solar in the last 40 years in Ladakh, and showing us and taking us to the way forward in line with Prime Minister's carbon neutral vision, as well as some of the policy changes like cold and sunny to the change of codes and so on, which is the purpose of this conference. So within a day, I landed in Ladakh 6-7 years ago. I was staying in a non-passive solar house, and I went to Sekmol. And it took me a day to understand the importance of this passive solar. And this question has been naturally coming to us in Himalayan Institute of Alternatives: is what is it that's taking 30 years for a place like Ladakh to adopt this technology? And there were several answers that came. It could be lack of awareness, it could be the youth that are not trained in this technology, it could be policy, and several other things. But to bring it out of the subjective realm into objective data, which speaks by itself unbiased, was our quest. And that brings us to the second pillar of the education that we follow, in addition to it being contextual, which I mentioned, is that it should be experiential. It is learning by doing. It is not just concepts and theory, it is applying it to life. And that's where our construction team built these buildings, and the energy team, led by Rohit, studied and measured these buildings. And he is now going to share with us the findings of that study, the culmination of the collaboration between HAYAL, FNHW, SDC, and Terry. Ralph Nader, an as political activist in the US, said that maybe solar energy is not opening up because oil industry does not own the sun. And I would say that maybe it's because the cement industry and steel industry also does not own the sun. Neither does it own the earth. So it's not in anybody's interest, commercial interest, that it be promoted. And that's where we have to work. And I invite Rohit now, who leads the effort at Hayal in the School of Energy Studies, to share the findings of the 3-year-long study on passive solar buildings. Rohit.
Thank you. I'll probably not need a mic. I'll switch this off. If I'm not audible, please do let me know and I'll start using it again. Or shout. Okay. Uh, so the topic of this short presentation was a lot of it has already been covered by Ka Sonam Wangchuk. So we'll quickly jump through a lot of things. You are free to ask questions if there are any. What are we trying to do here is going beyond sustainability with regenerative design. Sustainability is you grow your own food, you eat it, you sustain. You grow your own tree, you cut it, you use it to in your Bukharis to heat up your space. Regenerative is when you design something so that it lets the nature, leave the nature be, and it grows on it itself. If you just let it be, it regenerates. With that philosophy, Hayal has developed these 4 buildings. We'll go into details one at a time. Kashki, could you go next? This is how a Ladakhi modern conventional building looks, almost like a train. Next, what that leads to is this. This is the Leh Valley every winter. Next, we thought, what's the energy source? If everybody sees this, there must be a source of energy somewhere. We decided to look up. Next. So using the same philosophy, we built 4 buildings with the same footprint, with the same design, but different materials. When we came from Secmol's experience, we knew how to make a passive solar heated building. But by our own choice, we always went for earth. Our philosophy was sun above our head, earth below our feet, for housing for everyone. With that, we used different kinds of materials and made a 2 BHK plan. You are sitting above one of them right now, and we tested them with different types of building materials. The south facade, around that car is where the southern half is, and beyond that is the buffer zones. You are sitting here right now, above the rammed earth building. The interesting thing is it is a full scale model. It's a live lab. We are the guinea pigs. It's not just scientifically recorded every data every 10 minutes, but anecdotal feedback is also taken and improvements are done like that. The one of the things interesting thing is when we say that these buildings stay at plus 15 degrees Celsius, Ladakhis are not very interested. But when we say we have running cold water, even in winters, then everybody's like, oh, speak more about it. So something as simple as flowing tap water is a huge challenge in Ladakh. Sorry. So we adapt to convey our message to these people. Next, the one on the my leftmost and rightmost are one of the oldest techniques being followed in Ladakh for several hundreds and thousands of years. That's rammed earth construction. It is casted in situ, and this is adobe brick, the pagbu, the local sun-dried brick, which is used generally at every phase. But they have their own restrictions. They are time intensive, they are labor intensive, and sometimes they can be costly as well. Next. So we decided to speed up the construction in Ladakh. Ladakh has, depending upon the location, ranging from 6 months of construction period to as short as 2 months of construction period. So you have to develop materials or technologies
that can make buildings in that duration. The other buildings that I showed, rammed earth or adobe, generally took more than one season, which is called here, more than 1 year to construct, more than one season. But then the next evolution came. We decided, Ka Sona Wangchuk decided that try, sorry, let's try to mix straw and clay. The clay that is abundantly available in Leh, in Ladakh, in Basco, and the straw, which is a huge menace, a huge pollutant in Delhi. We tried to merge the two. We rescued it from there, brought it to Ladakh, mixed it with our clay, and made a block which has high insulation power and it is large in size. What that does is it's intuitively easier for any mason to work with, and being of low density, high insulation power, it does not need any extra insulation. The envelope. Right now, this wall is made out of straw clay bricks. The These are some. It is a kind of fiber reinforced earthen block. So the adobe pagbu, which was just soil, in that we have mixed straw, rescued from Punjab. It is low density, high insulation, easier to work with. You do not need extra cavity wall insulation, and it uses the straw which is rescued from Punjab. So it saves pollution twice, once in Punjab, then again in Ladakh. And it is a cost effective material because it reduces construction time and it's large in size and easier to work with. Next. We then that reduced the construction time to one season, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. We then thought, how can we further reduce the construction time? Matter of weeks for the Indian army or for people living in the forward locations who suffer the brunt most. So we came up with these large-sized prefab blocks, a modification of straw clay blocks. These are Lego-like structures, large in size. You put three on top of each other and you have a wall. This building that you see was constructed in 6 weeks. It used these kind of blocks. As you can see, it has two leaf of walls. The inside cavity can be zero based on if it is in Sham Valley, which is not very cold, or it could be 1 feet or 6 inches if it is at Durbuk, a forward location. The interesting thing in all of this was when we decided to go with to meet our electricity needs. 80% of our energy is being made through the nuclear fusion. We decided, okay, whatever rest 10 or 15% of energy that we need to power our projectors or charge our cameras or power our laptops, where does that come from? We use these solar photovoltaic panels just for that. No electricity or any other means is being used to heat up our building. But even that, this one building alone powers all our four other buildings. So this was a tested system. And here what we tried to do is, generally solar panels need to have a roof underneath so that it is waterproof. But here, this is an experiment where the solar panels themselves are the roof. You don't need anything else. So when we say rooftop solar, this could be the next big thing. This was tried and tested, and we are now knowing that this works. Next, we say sun. It's not very difficult. Yeah, so this became an energy positive building, and I have already explained all the structure. It's a modular structure. The added benefit of this is the holes that you see here that can take reinforcement from steel. So the straw clay is the insulative jacket, and all the load comes on the steel, which is understood by people. Sadly, our building bylaws or building codes do not address these kind of things. हमारी किताबें ये नहीं कहती, हम इसको follow नहीं कर सकते. So a technology that works was not adopted. But then we decided, okay, we have to change our means or method of addressing this issue. Before that, we'll go into the performance of these buildings. Next. Oh, yeah, so this is how the building is constructed. Next. So Lego-like structures, one on top of the other, and you have the entire envelope ready. Once the envelope is ready, the inside temperature stays at 15 degrees Celsius. So a laborer who has to work inside is much more happy when working at Hayal than working anywhere else, because he or she has to work at 15 degrees Celsius. In winters, they are like, "Humko kaam de do." Anyways, next. So some of the major innovations will go change. Will not go into a lot of details, but this wall that you see is using waste plastic bottles embedded inside concrete blocks. Inside these double glazed layers are these thermal blocks which stores all that heat and radiates it in the evening period or the night period to warm this place. You will not believe it. You have to come in winters to believe this. This is exactly how someone in this building would see it, with just one extra layer. In Ladakh, when it's minus 15 outside. Next. So this was some of the details that we had done, but we'll not go into details. The important thing is we reduced our U values drastically. But it's not just the insulation. We have also increased the thermal mass here so that the heat from the sun is stored and we have long autonomy. Next. Next. The roof are using low density false insulation ranging from pashmina waste to shredded thermocol, any waste that we try to find. The problem is now that we are not finding enough waste, but we are trying to look into more details and go into finding more solutions to these problems. Kaushiki, next. Next. This is the best part that I love. These are the temperature performances of January recorded in Hayal buildings compared against conventional buildings which are heated and conventional buildings room in the same building which are non-heated, and the ambient temperature which is in blue. The solid line is the average temperature. The dotted one is the minimum temperature recorded in that period for all of them. As you can see, the Hayal buildings stay at ranging from plus 18 to 25 degrees Celsius. Minimum, not talking about maximum right now. The heated room in the conventional building stays averaging at around 12 degrees Celsius. When there is no one in the house, it drastically drops to 10 in the same period. At that time, when it's not heated, early morning hours after 10 p.m., it almost starts touching zero. At the non-heated room stays at a comfortable minus 5 degrees Celsius throughout. So our buildings are designed to be freezers instead of warmers. And the ambient fluctuates between minus 10 to minus 15 degrees Celsius. Next. And then we compared the average temperature with the instantaneous temperature, because it's not the minimum temperature that matters, because it happens at 5 or 6 early in the morning when you are very warmly tucked inside your bed. It is the late evening temperature, 8 p.m., and when you are interacting with people, sitting with family, having dinner, when the temperature actually matters. And even that temperature was again between 18 to 25 degrees Celsius in these buildings, and while the others were performing relatively low. When we say these buildings, as Sonamji said, there are minute differences. Maybe Adobe is performing zero point 0.5 degrees better than Stockley, but when compared against anything else being done in Ladakh, the difference is huge. Next. Next. So we also compared the office spaces. This is a government building. This is this office right now. It's the government building is below 0 degrees Celsius. It's as soon as the uh, Sahab as the comes, Bukhari is heated and it goes to 30 degrees Celsius at times, and then at 4 it's switched off and it drops back to almost 5, dropping slowly to 0. So this delta that you see, everybody who pays tax, just imagine this is your money being put into that Bukhari. That's it. While a solar heated building just by the sun, and this is the coldest spell. First, second, third, and fourth Jan. This is the coldest spell. It stays comfortably between 18 degrees Celsius to 22 degrees Celsius, which everybody will agree is comfortable. And on Sundays, when no heating is happening, sun does not take chutti. So it still functions. Next. Then, what are the cost economics? टेम्परेचर तो अच्छा है, पैसे कितने लगेंगे भैया? Next. The extra cost payback. If you start from design phase, it can range from 0 to maybe 10%, which is just recovered in within a season almost 100% of times. We went beyond that, compared the operational cost with the capital cost. And when I say operational cost, I just mean fuel. The amount of fuel that someone would have burnt in a conventional building versus the entire capital cost that someone would have invested in making a passive solar heated building. We did those calculations, found that in 11 years in Leh, the entire capital cost of the building is recovered, and after that, it is free. At forward locations like Durbuk or Hanle, within 4 years, that entire cost is recovered. Within 4 years, this is the amount of fuel we are burning. Then we did some more calculations, and this number, which you see, 10 tons of carbon dioxide per 100 square meter. 100 square meter is roughly the size of this ground floor. It emits 10 tons of carbon dioxide. This is 4 times less that we have done.
When wood is being used in Bukhari?
Kerosene.
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 Compared to kerosene.
Yeah, compared to kerosene. What we are trying to do is make 10,000 such passive solar heated buildings so that these numbers that you see are stopped from emitting. Next. So as I said, sadly, everything that we done, it does not follow the building codes. We follow concrete beam pillar, and that's what we know. So we said, okay, as Sonamji says, we'll put our food in your plate. We decided to go with pillar beam structure column. Every bylaw follows that. And instead of going with infill, we decided we'll go with exfill. We'll put the insulative jacket around the entire envelope. This is what these Stockley bricks are doing in this. The result is a prototype passive solar heated frame structure with Stockley, which we call as exfill technique. Based on the learnings from all these 4 buildings, that building is going to outperform any other all our 4 buildings. Next. Next. Then the answer was, oh, you guys make only smaller buildings. You cannot do large scale passive solar heated buildings. So if you, on your way, you must have seen a concrete building coming up. That is a prototype for that's the answer to this statement that no, you can make large scale passive solar heated building. Setmol did it 30 years ago when it was the largest footprint passive solar heated building. We are going to do it again so that emissions not only at forward locations but at headquarters can also be stopped. This is a 20,000 square feet passive solar heated building that we call the academic admin building, and this will be the prototype for the governments to follow. Next, with the same exfill technique. Then, as Kasona Wangchuk said, the Indian Army has been very supportive and receptive of this technology. Using all the data that we had, they got interested. They were like, okay, let's make some. Next, some prototypes from guard house, sentry post. Next, to very luxurious living quarters. मिट्टी के घर हमेशा लो लेवल नहीं होते. They are not always the poor man's choice. It can be as elaborate by anyone who can afford it. In fact, in Switzerland, rammed earth building, or sorry, in Hollywood, as I am told, not the rich can afford rammed earth. Only the rich of the rich can afford it, the super rich. So this is one of the prototypes that we did at one of the army locations. This is at Lake, and this is at some forward locations. Next, this is the temperature where it dropped to minus 20 outside. These shelters stay at around 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. Next, now we have a message. Don't just hear what we say. We have a message from someone special who tried and tested these buildings and then had something to say about it. Next, it will play.
We are sitting in front of the newly built, fully passive solar heated building at 14 floor. Now, around the world, armies are known to pollute, and we are seeing the consequences of all the.
Sorry, just a second. The sound here.
We are sitting in front of the newly built, fully passive solar heated building at 14 floor. Now, around the world, armies are known to pollute, and we are seeing the consequences of all the pollutions from different parts of the world. At such a time, how did 14 core get interested in cutting down carbon and becoming a green army in the true sense?
Mr. Sonam, this has been from the vision of our Prime Minister when on the Independence Day he said that Ladakh must become a carbon neutral or a negative state. And knowing the fact that what you said that armies all over the world do pollute, we decided to take it upon ourselves to see how we could do a little better. And one of the major issues of our pollution is the heating arrangements required for soldiers living at 16 to 20,000 feet. And these are based on Bukharis and generators. And therefore, we decided to collaborate with your organization, which is already working on a passive solar heated building. And we thought, why not do a trial? And we made four such shelters in Ladakh. One here is Leh, one each in Chushul, uh, kilometer 120, and in Andhra, to see the efficacy of this shelter. And I must say, the one that you're looking at right now has proved much better than we had expected, and we have had no requirement whatsoever of any kind of heating in this shelter so far.
The amount of kerosene oil burnt on heating soldiers, when replaced with such fully solar heated ones, I was doing a calculation, it will save roughly 300,000 tons of carbon.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And the cost of heating of a building like this was 10 years is roughly equal to or little more than the cost of the building. In fact, by making a building like this, we are saving not only carbon emissions, but a lot of money to the exchequer.
So, what are the summary of our findings? These passive solar heated buildings can be fully autonomous. You don't need any extra ounce of any kind of fuel to heat them. Full autonomy. The cost can be recovered within 4 to 11 years depending upon the location, so it makes total financial sense. Uh, what our recommendation is, if you actually want a carbon neutral Ladakh, you have to go for solar housing. Include the PSH by techniques or general recommendations in the bylaws, in the energy conservation building codes, and most important of all, recognize Ladakh as cold but sunny climate. Do not throw the gift away. Nature is giving you free gift. Accept it. Next. Yeah. Any questions you are free to ask.
So when you talk about climate zone, is it only cold or cold and dry?
Cold and dry it
It's
is.
considered as cold
It
and
is
dry.
cold and dry. No, but when NBC in 2005 segregated Ladakh's India's climate, it merged cold and cloudy with cold and sunny. Before that, till 2005 it was Ladakh was cold and sunny. It was recognized as that. But now with UT, so much of construction is going to happen. Almost it's said 60 to 70% of construction in Ladakh is to happen. So the right thing to do, as our data shows, is to go with passive solar from day one. Do not think about retrofitting right now, because that is patching of a poor job. If you do not correct the system, you'll always have poor jobs out. Yeah.
One more question. We are in high LT area right now. I'm working with of Haryana in public works one. So over there, how much if we use this technology and if I just propose this technology in my department, what do you think? How much benefit my department can have?
Uh, to say this winter, it was almost 50% thanks to climate change. It was almost 50% cloudy spell. So that spell is anything that you would get in Shimla or any other cold region. As long as because these passive solar heated buildings are not just passive solar, they are energy efficient with utilization of sun. So with a little modifications, they can always suit any climate that needs it.
I agree, but one thing usually most of the construction company always miss. There is an ancient technique हमारे यहाँ भी होती थी और एक ग्रीक में भी होती थी. रोमन्स भी इस चीज को बहुत पहले यूज करते थे. मैं हिंदी बोल सकता हूँ, होप नो. ओके. Romans were using that where they specify in particular type of magnetic signature your contents what you are using, and actually that specify can be a catalyst to build a stronger building and giving you a parameter to have a sustainable life. So that was the thing. Over here you have much more higher magnetic signatures in your soil over here because of, and as compared to my state.
What is magnetic signature?
Sir, mineral availability of minerals on soil, and if you like, can I give an example to save the time?
Is it about climate and energy conservation, or
Yeah,
is it
both,
about
both,
some,
sir, both.
mythical?
No, not sir.
Greek
both.
mythical.
No. It's a practical thing.
Okay.
What I have practically experienced. If my question is last, then we can discuss
We
it.
can take it off time.
But to
No.
answer you, just in short, that of course Haryana and the plains have a cold winter spell also.
Yes.
That it can definitely benefit, and I always say
There
when I
see
go from
there are advantages using this.
I want to interrupt for a minute or two. I live in Gurgaon, which is in Haryana, and I do not have any heaters in the house for the last 15 years. And I have even this jacket that I'm wearing today, I had to fish out from the loft because I don't use any jackets at all. I mean, I wear a light jacket. Yes, bandi पहनता हूँ एक.
you might have to say your solar.
Yes.
Because otherwise it just sounds like Delhi is so warm in winter. but JG and for sir, how you could save money is because all passive solar buildings are good energy efficient things also. So in summer your air conditioning system would be a quarter of
Which is that, Rohit, you are talking about increasing thermal mass in passive solar buildings.
this is what we have done here and found it successful.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I agree, but prefab and straw clay decrease thermal mass quite dramatically.
What gets mixed up is increasing thermal mass in straw clay buildings.
Huh.
He's talking about.
Okay, okay.
Not in rammed earth, but in lightweight material houses, because we have gone into that, so we have to increase the
So
thermal.
you keep it inside then,
Yes,
the space.
yes. Only in these light structures we increase thermal mass, not in these heavy ones like rammed earth.
Yes.
I have one question. What about cloudy days?
It's a pretty cloudy day. You are comfortable.
So Ladakh is
It's summer now.
But then it's
Even in
summer.
winters.
In winters.
So that would be called autonomy of the building, and exactly what Sanjay ji is asking is about introducing mass. So you introduce mass so that it's warm in the day, but what about night? So the mass takes you through the night. It's warm today, but what about cloudy days in the next few days? Again, mass and insulation takes you through. Now, what we go by is normal Ladakhi winters, where you don't get more than 3 to 4 cloudy days. If we get by some chance 2 weeks of cloudy, then our buildings will go down to maybe plus 10. Then you may have to have a backup, but that normally doesn't happen.
Just one question.
Can we take it like?
Yeah, it was with you only. My question was to you only because you had given us a suggestion, and I was looking forward to that. You, for the shelters, you were telling about running. That is the next challenge we are posing now. That most of the shelters do not have this running water supply. I'm sure you will cover it later, or you will share with me. And the second point was with our challenge in the army. Although we have been going a long way in constructing these shelters, is most of our shelters are relocatable shelters. In the sense, you see, the scenario keeps changing. We need to relocate those shelters from one place to the other. You would have realized that the number of shelters we have constructed, Ladakhi shelters, are very limited. Although we want to go it in a big way, I'm sure maybe some kind of prefabricated panels, you might come out with a method where I have got the option of shifting my shelters from one place to the other.
Yes, sir, we
Maybe.
are working on that. Sir.
Yes, I'm sure that they can do this.
And solar tents. We'll come back to that.
Yes, so this is what Rohit presented to you is what we have done in Sekmol and at Hayal over the last 2 years. Now the question comes, what next? Right? How do we take it to the rest of Ladakh, to the rest of the world? How do we mainstream it? And that's where collaboration becomes the key. And that is the third pillar of what we do in Hayal, that we collaborate with all the stakeholders, right from the village to the youth to the government, international agencies. And while the whole world is for copywriting things, we allow all our technologies to be copyleft. They are all available freely, be it how to make an ice stupa or how to make a passive solar building. All our research and technology is copyleft, freely available to the world, because climate change does not have political boundaries. You know, if it's going to hit us together. So if we have found something good, why not replicate it around the world? And now I'll invite Jonathan to talk to us about how international cooperation in these matters holds the key and how we have been working together to take this technology worldwide. So, Jonathan heads the Swiss Development Corporation in India and has been a visitor to Ladakh ever since he was a schoolboy. And he's come here in, while he was doing his college, his master's, PhD, and now as the head of Swiss Development Corporation India. Over to you, John.
Do I need a microphone, by the way?
No.
So thank you very much. That's a big task that you're putting on my small shoulders, but I try to take it. Honorable Chief Executive Councillor of Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council, LE, Executive Councillor of Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council, Kargil, Dear Sanam Wokchuk, dear colleagues, friends, and participants, it's a huge honor and huge pleasure to be here with you today at this conference on passive solar housing in a passive solar house and in Ladakh. Sanam Wokchuk, I admire you because I think you're the only person who can go to a 3-star general, decorated general, and tell him all over the world, armies are known for polluting. So, congratulations. I will never dare say it. But I think the words of this general gives a lot of hope. Not only because the army is going to turn carbon neutral, but because it gives the hope that the next wars will be waged not against neighbors, but against climate change. And that's a huge message of hope. We talked a lot about the sun. And I think it's no surprise that our ancestors knew very well the importance of the sun. Every single old religion had the god of the sun. Take Helios, take Sol, take Ra for the Egyptian, Zoroastrianism, Surya for the Hindu. Single religion, even Christians are based on the solar calendar. So I think we all agree on the importance of the sun. However, we don't use it to its full potential. And that's why we're here today. And by the way, I was just thinking, you mentioned Ladakhi song that talk about the sun. Our Swiss national song also starts with mentioning the sun rays rising over the mountains. So I think that's one place in which Ladakh and Switzerland meet as well. I'm here, I have the honor also to represent the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, who I work with, which is part of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, or Ministry of External Affairs. It's present in more than 40 countries. SDC has been working in India for more than 60 years, but since 2012, we work exclusively on climate change and environment. Because, we see it as one of the main challenges, and if we think about the contribution, what we can learn from India, what we can work together in India, it's climate change and environment. And that's what we're doing, and this is the basis of our cooperation with the government, with government agencies, with the private sector, with different organizations and civil society organizations. So together with Indian government, with Swiss and Indian partners like IHAL, TERI, with the University of Applied Sciences and Arts, Northwestern Switzerland, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, or SDC, works on climate change and the environment. And this is one of the illustrations of what we do, what we support. Climate change is happening. It's affecting primarily the most vulnerable, and we need to act. And this is why one of the main aspects of our program is working on climate resilient development. So how can we make communities, cities, and states resist to the impact of climate change and natural disasters? And of course, the other aspect is low carbon development. There are limits to adaptation to climate change. We know that, we see it more and more. And to what human societies and life on Earth can stand. And therefore, we need to limit our greenhouse gas emissions to contain the increase of temperatures as much as we can. And this is why we have projects on developing low carbon cement, on energy efficiency, for instance, on renewable energies, and in agriculture. So in the field of agriculture, for instance, we work on satellite imagery and insurance for small farmers, on solar irrigations and the impact of solar irrigations. In the Himalayas, we work a lot on disaster risk management to increase the resilience of mountain states, cities, and population. We work on air pollution in cities, also a big topic in India. And all over the world. We work on climate resilient cities action plans in 2 states and 8 cities. And we have just launched a new project on electric mobility. And one of the big projects that has been running for some time is on energy efficiency in housing, which later included the integration of renewable energy in buildings. And the part of it, one aspect is the collaboration on passive solar housing. And this is this project. So we are learning to use the source of all energy on Earth, nearly all energy on Earth, which is the sun. In the past, the source also of past and present, Gitanjali was also mentioning how the oil companies don't use the sun, maybe because the sun is free. Well, the petrol we use is past solar energy as well, transformed into fossil fuels. So we go back to the sun. So from July 20 to September 22, we've worked on several objectives to investigate reason for acceptance of passive solar housing in Ladakh. Although it's a brilliant solution as we are seeing, but I think we are seeing a change now, thanks to the hard work that has been done to hire. To assess the performance of selected existing PSH buildings, to recommend PSH-friendly bylaws, to promote skill development, to transfer Swiss project management approaches through expert exchange. And the passive solar housing project has delivered a lot in terms of data validation, advocacy, on capacity building of architects and builders, and showing, conducting thermal comfort survey at high altitude, and showing, coming with this very, I think, convincing data on the advantage of passive solar housing and what we all have to gain from it. It's also a pleasure to come here because Ladakh, as Gitanjali has mentioned, is also part of my personal story. I came here in 2001 to teach in a school in Alchi. But then I came back in 2004, realizing that I had probably much more to learn from Ladakh, that I had to teach in Ladakh. So I started doing my master's thesis on the ecological footprint of subsistence farmers. And it was amazing because I found what probably was the smallest ecological footprint you could find, anywhere in the world. And it was that Ladakh maybe not totally sustainable, but this came quite easily because the biocapacity at that time we mentioned that 1% of the land could be cultivated to transform into forest and soil, could be increased, but also because the demand for resources was actually very low and very, very, very short. And it was amazing, fascinating to see how people look at local resources. Local resources are scarce and precious and use them as such, which is something that we not often do in the place where I come from. We have to relearn that. We saw, that's also a similarity we have between Switzerland and Ladakh is that sun is the main resource, of course, land and water. Wherever you have sun, land, and water, you have villages, and this is the same in Ladakh. If you don't have either sun or land or water, you don't have cultivated land, you don't have villages. And it's the same in Switzerland, that's the same in the Alps, that's the same all over mountain places. We saw in Ladakh how people apply the principle of circular economy even before we coined the term circular economy. As Tashi Rabgas used to say, Ladakhi are the real economists. And so the question is, of course, how carbon neutrality can be reached, but also how can be regained based on these past experiences and this past knowledge, which is so precious and we should not lose. I came back from 2006 to 2008 to learn more about people-environment relationship, practices of mobility, how this were transformed by urban construction. And I spent half a winter in Ningxet, where I learned a lot about passive solar housing because from the first part of the year I was staying in a very comfortable passive solar school, temperatures were nice. But then when the teachers left, I could not stay on my own, so I moved to a family. It was fantastic. You cannot live in isolation. You cannot not live alone. You need to be with people to live. But of course, it was much colder. So we gathered in the winter kitchen. I was sleeping in a room where for 3 weeks my bottle did not remain frozen. So the temperature never went above 0 degrees. So we had that's another way that you haven't mentioned to get warm that people use in Ningxet. Do you know which one it is?
Dancing.
Exactly, dancing. So when you sit outside and you look at your bowl of chong, the ice covering your bowl of chong, it gets really cold and the snow is falling and people start dancing. They put the music on and they start dancing while they sing. And that's how we got warm over the winter. So we dance a lot. I don't like dancing. I hate dancing. But I've never danced so much in my life. I learned dancing also through Ladakh. So for me today is like two worlds meeting. My experience with Ladakh and now my work with SDC. And I'm very proud to see these two worlds coming together. And I tried also to bring Jairus for you who you mentioned and who I worked with to bring people from Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, it was not possible, but I think that will be the next step. Because I think we can also learn from them, and they can also learn from what is happening here. And in order to reach net zero, of course, we need clean technologies, we need knowledge, we need innovations, we need a lot of willing power. And we don't need investment, of course. But I think for the principle, we need to look at what has happened for hundreds of years in Ladakh as well, how people use the resources. And when we talk about sustainable lifestyles and pro-planet people, one needs to look also at Ladakh, or societies like Ladakh. So coming back to exchange of ideas, I think we can learn a lot from passive solar housing and what is being demonstrated. And it's a very good example of knowledge sharing. Development very often tends to act as a kind of homogenizing process. We look for innovations. We look for technical solutions. We solve one problem, and then we create 1,000 others. And I think diversity is the key to adaptation and sustainability. Solutions that work somewhere can work in other places, but they may have also other solution, and we have to keep that in mind. It's very easy to lose the knowledge and good practices that have been acquired over generations and generations. It just takes one generation. Think of cooking, how people forget about cooking. One generation and it's gone. We tend to be also very problem specific. We tend to solve one problem, but we create others, as I mentioned before. So we have to take a sort of holistic perspective, take a life cycle approach. What is the overall impact of what we are doing here? Look at the social and ecological dimensions. So anyway, I'm going to stop here because we have a lot to cover, a lot of people to hear here. And I'm looking forward to these 2 days. So once again, thank you very much. I think it will be a fascinating exchange of knowledge on architecture, on passive solar housing, and many other experiments that we're going to share here. So thanks a lot once again, and yeah.
So thank you, Jonathan, and for interweaving your personal story with the story of passive solar heating in Ladakh, and especially for that enduring statement, I think, which could be the takeaway of this conference, that instead of coming to teach Ladakh, I realized that I have a lot to learn from Ladakh. And that's the story that we have to learn, that what we call rural or tribal India, that's where the wisdom is lying. That's where the wisdom is lying untouched by this so-called English-speaking elite education, which is today at the helm of affairs, designing policies with complete disconnect with that true and rural India. And we have a lot to learn. Let us, when we visit these places, visit with a lot of humility and with wanting to learn, because these societies for thousands of years have lived sustainably in harmony with nature with minimum resources. So thank you for that statement, and I think that could be a takeaway of this conference. Now, in the true spirit of collaboration, we invite you all in a world cafe table format. And so far, the stage was set. What we have done so far, what is passive solar heating, and now we invite you all to perform. So please take this ID card out that you have, and what you will see inside on the left is a child's impression, a SECMOL student. We ran a friendly competition there, that what is the Ladakh of today and how would you see the Ladakh of tomorrow. And this was a visual representation of a student of SECMOL. And on the right is a blank page where we would invite you to fill it up. What is your idea of carbon neutral Ladakh and how it can be achieved? And when I say collaboration, it is not just collaboration of various stakeholders. This is also helping me practice to be an operating actress. It is also a collaboration of different disciplines. And that's why at every table, we have people who come from different backgrounds, different disciplines. And we go beyond multi and interdisciplinary to transdisciplinary approach, where we invite you to brainstorm within at your tables and bring your expertise of your different disciplines and Please fill this page individually.
Bring together to come out with recommendations.
With recommendations, yes, of your idea of carbon neutral Ladakh and your recommendations of how to achieve it.
Starting with your own way.
Yes, and you can do it through a photograph, or you can draw it here, write it, sing about it here, anything. Yes, and we have how much time for it?
Wait, I didn't understand. So the tables discuss about their thoughts, but before that, we start the process with each one stimulating their mind with a drawing on the paper, right?
Drawing or writing, each one may not be able to draw.
Do we first do it individually or do we
Yeah.
do it in the group?
First, individually to stimulate our minds to think what a carbon neutral Ladakh could be, I think. Then on the table, then in house.
Yes. And then
But Sonam, somebody will have to act as the repertoire, no, of that table.
yes.
Yeah. To kind of represent the table fairly.
So one person from the energy team and the construction team can be at each of the tables as we discussed. And after you filled it out here individually, there is a page, there is a blank sheet at each of the tables, and then they also come and present each one.
No, we'll have a full house discussion. We won't go into because we don't have so much time to present each table, but we'll then have an open house session after the break on tables. No?
Any questions on the process? So individually, you can please draw on this, your idea of carbon neutral Ladakh, and then have a discussion amongst yourselves, and then use the paper here at each table.
Rather than much better if we just speak directly, this can be a better.
Let's stimulate our right brain as well.
How much will be the names? Printer this.
Try to draw.
Reading and listening. I'm all set.
I see many of you writing, so I know you may not have drawn since your kindergarten days. But when we are starting to rethink from first principles, art comes before words, right? Like it did to early man. So let's start from first principles and activate our visual brain.
Once we are all finished, then we can start.
Yeah, we can start.
So you can start with your thoughts, sir. I think we can discuss.
So,
Very few people are drawing.
I think you all realize that though I'm an architect, I've chosen not to draw because that drawing is already there. That came from my studio, and that drawing is there as well, and so on, and that drawing as well. So 3 drawings are already there. Uh, but these are higher and not Ladakh. So I've chosen not to draw not because I think that visuals are not important. I think they are terribly important. But somehow the world doesn't change on the basis of visuals. The world changes on the basis of policies and laws and so in a sense what I've done is I've written out a timetable of what will happen in the next 18 years and so I'll just read out to you what it is.
Some of you have, if you have completed individually, taking
So,
mine.
in 2023,
Take 10 next
passive
minutes
solar
to
housing
discuss
bylaws are notified by
And
LAHDC
the idea is that
and
this also
accepted
becomes your
by
story,
Union Territory.
when you go back, your takeaway of my idea, my vision
This is
of
very doable,
carbon neutral Ladakh.
but some of these are not. Then, the second one, in the same year, 2023, the new airport which is being built, which has a large potential for carbon neutrality, goes carbon neutral. HIAL is working with Airports Authority of India to try and get this in place, and it actually happens. So they don't heat the airport; they accept, let's say, 16 degrees as an acceptable temperature in January, because people are wearing overcoats anyway when they come in January. Then, in 2025, the first passive solar housing buildings are made according to those bylaws, and in 2030, which might be quite easy actually, 10% houses built are passive solar, which includes water harvesting, composting, and organic agriculture because this is a very agrarian economy. So even in cities, there are lots of fields. So in Leh, for example, I have stayed in various homestays in which there was always a field associated with the family. In 2035, the world carbon dioxide levels reach their peak in the atmosphere. This is hopeful. I do not think this will happen so fast, but anyway, I'll be in this. And 2040, 50% of all new buildings are passive solar and they don't require heating anymore. But this does create a little bit of a problem because it can mean that people who have vested interest in the kerosene economy
Will not let it happen.
Will not let it happen so easily. And this happened to me when I designed the Sonam S&M hospital extension. I designed a floor heating system, and they were burning a lot of diesel before that to heat the whole place. So the local engineers were very unhappy with the whole situation. And it was only when Sonam fell ill and went into that hospital, and he enjoyed the ambience, and in fact he gave me my first kata at that time when he came to Delhi. That and Dr. Rava was there also. He was a very progressive kind of doctor. So he was the medical superintendent, and he managed to paper over these problems that the engineers were facing when they didn't want to go for floor heating. Instead, they didn't want to go passive. Of course, they would still have burnt some.
Floor heating was electric.
No. It was diesel based, but the diesel quantity would have reduced dramatically. It would have come to 1/10 or so. So I don't know what is happening there now. I haven't visited. I haven't fallen ill while in Ladakh.
So they use electric heater now. Yeah, they use electric heaters, but the quantity is very less. Floor heating is still working well. People say that's remain warm in the winter time.
But do you have the floor heating system there now? No.
It's working. It's radiant heating. Yeah.
Well, good to know that at least it's working.
It's a good place.
I think the thought what I have written is more or less matching with you. I have not put the timelines, but I have written in a very crude manner that the government of the UT of Ladakh need to formulate policy guidelines for solar passive heating construction and impose partial ban on fossil fuels. It is a big stake actually what you said. There are people who are involved in fossil fuels who won't let it happen. But this is the start point, I think. You need to have policies, you need to have strict imposition of the same for something to come up. This is a thought process, but this thought process to go wide needs policies in place. Then various construction agencies in Ladakh or outside agencies, there are outside agencies which are working in Ladakh. They need to follow it as a norm. That imposition also has to be there. Not the local only.
But here I see a big challenge that, for example, we even design bamboo buildings which follow codes because happens to be a code in India for bamboo buildings.
Okay.
But I can see on their faces that the executive engineer's face shows that he doesn't want to do it this way. He would much rather work in concrete and brick and everything.
Easier and established way of
So easy and conventional. So that code has never been used by anybody, I think. It was used by us first time in Shanghai when we did the Expo Pavilion in Bangalore. And the Expo authorities wanted us to prove it, and China doesn't have a bamboo code, so we had to use the Indian bamboo code. And there was a translation in Mandarin that was there with one professor who gave us the approval. But basically, there is no move towards accepting the variations that come with nature. Should I put it that way? For example, bamboo will have multiple dimensions. It's not like steel pipes where you can manufacture 80 mm dia ad infinitum. And
but bamboo is a workable. Do you have that much of cultivation of bamboo in Ladakh?
not in Ladakh.
Not in Ladakh. So you get it from outside. Northeast, you have to cut
No,
it
I will not use it here. I've used it in Maharashtra, I've used it in Northeast.
Second, my point was that most of the construction over you see it's all wood based, paneling, whatever is being done. There is no so much of forest which is available in Ladakh. It's all coming from J&K,
It is.
isn't it? So again, that cannot be a progressive. Yes, it's not a solution.
It's not a solution. But PWD especially does not recognize that. They say, okay, give us an alternative.
Yeah.
But they're not willing to look at an alternative which is
Just to put this in perspective, we are going to have Excuse me, just a second. So there is going to be a clam declaration, right? We are going to come up with a declaration for Ladakh. It is towards that this exercise is happening.
Okay.
Where this entire, the bright minds can contribute to that. And that to stimulate, we have discussions at the table. And to stimulate that, we had an individual session where we first thought about it. So the aim is the CAM declaration, which we will
I
be.
actually didn't really think in terms of timelines. First, I thought of what Ladakh will look like if suppose we became net zero. And I'm looking at net zero not only from the perspective of energy, but generally as a net zero, you're neutral on many other aspects, environmental aspects, which also have, of course, an impact on the carbon aspect as well. So clearly, for example, here, especially I see that these are not very high-rise buildings, so they can become net zero with passive solar as well as therefore solar PV. So I think a net zero code, rather than just the passive solar code, should be required. Possibly that's right. The second was
For your information, IL is working on
the net zero.
on the net zero code, which hopefully they will submit to the and LHCC. Let's see.
The second thing that I find is that ratifies this code. Ratifies this code. Local, I think municipal bodies.
Or ratifies this. No.
Like you got a building code for construction and all.
No, now with UT having become a UT,
They can.
LHTC can ratify the code. Yes. And they can say this is a local code which we want to follow, and
They can follow a central code. They can have their own tweaks. The second thing that I find is that I think a lot of taxis and transport will be used here because tourism will be there. And I think very quickly we can move on to EVs, biofuels, or EVs, or even hydrogen fuels. I mean, depending on let's say next 3, 4 or 5 years how the technology is evolved. But clearly there is a possibility of becoming completely fossil-free transport. So that I think is a very important aspect. The third aspect is large sinks. So creating large sinks here. I think there is a possibility here. China has done a lot of work on that. I think we can also do it. Is to do afforestation and agroforestry. So as a sink, so you have create carbon dioxide sinks. So afforestation, agroforestry, again, HIAL is working on it quite a lot. And since water is around Mumbai, and at least most of the major cities, there is some stream flowing by or and water is perennial. So I think that also can be a very large scale program.
While
that can be
very healthy discussion is very good, but if one of you can start writing it down here as well.
So that's another, I think, large part of the carbon neutral aspect that we could look at. We could have a kind of a net zero solid waste policy here. I think a lot of cleanliness already is here, so I think the practice is quite sustainable. Hotels, I think homes as well. And homes as well, I think, because the way it is collected, I don't know how it is collected, but clearly because these are not very high-rise buildings, easy to transport, not very congested. So actually you could have solid waste which is net zero, where all organic waste is recycled and processed. All plastic waste or textile material, essentially construction material, is reused in some form in construction again. And all biomedical waste is easily taken. So I think these policies could really impact this because that will actually make a big impact in terms of as a tourist destination as well. The second, the last is altered lifestyle as well. I think the lifestyle here is very sustainable already. If you look at it, but the way possibly they might grow, it might turn into a little more unsustainable. So I think some moderate consumption lifestyle promotion of what to consume and what not to possibly might also be an important part of becoming carbon neutral. And the other is net water positive as well. I think that if you are actually using fresh water, anybody who's using fresh water should make sure that either he is through some kind of a credit mechanism or otherwise ensuring that the same fresh water is replenished in some way or the other. So there are some ideas that we will work with
Because,
It's a tough
for
one.
example, 90% of the water in Ladakh is used for agriculture. And in spite of the nascent ice stupa ideas, the fact is that glaciers are melting faster and faster. And it's not the Ladakhis' fault that it's happening.
It's a tough challenge. Agriculture is more difficult to do, but I think individuals and industries and hotels they could at least
Be next to water.
and as long as you can generally see if the overall cycles are generally positive, that okay, if you are actually minimizing, for example, pollutant levels in the air, generally if the ice is not melting, in that case I think the whole system. So I think all these aspects I think will make, in my sense, a carbon neutral Ladakh. And I think all these areas possibly can work.
Don't have so much detail. Just I've been living in Ladakh for last 1 year. There's few issues I've faced.
For the last how many years?
1 year. So there are few issues which I've seen here and observed. So definitely solar passive heated building is definitely must take. But then there's also fuel. I think hydrogen fuel is the green hydrogen can be the biggest solution. NTPC is already putting a plant here for that. So this year they'll run a pilot project for that, and then there'll be upcoming more projects for green
Actually, it can
hydrogen.
be a great generator of green hydrogen here because you have so much of solar energy coupled with
It's
fertilizer.
already on the plan. The first solar plant is already has been operated. So hopefully we'll have a next year.
This can be a solar refinery.
We cannot use the Indus water directly because of some treaty
Yeah, with the
with
Pakistan.
Pakistan. But we can use pumped water, say 20 meters from the edge of the river.
Yes.
So that is probably what.
But actually, in Indus Water Treaty, also, we are not using even our current share, what is there.
True.
There is a lot of scope to improve that. You can use it. But I think you do not need water because if you actually have, not use so much of water because if you already have, let's say, solar energy here, you just, let's say, kind of taking up water. So, no, I think the consumption नहीं होगा because the kind of volumes that you need for hydrogen, hydrogen can be available.
And then I think the option for the set on the is there's a I've seen I've observed that on the cloudy days there's a very good wind. So we should have panels. We could have a small turbines also on the roofs.
Ladakh has
Yeah.
investigated.
Actually, you should have both solar and wind.
So
And
that
there are
you
these
can have-
combined.
This is already actually implemented. Like we have got this some
In the army, they're
10,
using
10 kilowatt. We have got
vertical turbines.
50% being the solar and 30% being the wind. Associated problem with this is very critical maintenance of this area. I went to the forward areas and all where we wanted this. Post afternoon onward, you got huge winds are there.
2 to 5.
Yes, but then what is happening is that there's a lot of dust particles also which is on the plant. Which is most of the fulcrums are choked. And the only thing which is coming through is coming through the solar. And solar also the efficiency is not 180% something, just about 20%.
Yeah.
But solar efficiency is 20%.
I think there are some solar panels that will build with good efficiency, 40 above 40%.
But mainstreaming definitely involves, in my opinion, the creation of a whole cadre of workmen and maintenance people who can be available on a phone call and say, "कि अभी आते हैं,
Yes.
we'll correct it."
Now these people who are doing it are also somewhere else. Maybe
Correct.
or
Chandigarh or somewhere.
that was the time delay is there. So you need to empower own people for this.
And that's a great job creator.
But give a basic training for the local people.
By the way, that's a huge job creator.
Yes.
But that actually can be done only when you do it at a large scale. So actually, if you have a let's say city-wide program,
Yes.
okay, we want to convert net zero building. These are financial incentives. you can go and adopt it. For example, if you can do that, and if you have, let's say, 50,000 such installations, in that case, you can have a good, kind of maintenance base here who can actually.
But as soon as you're putting photovoltaics on the wind turbines, you're talking about active and not completely passive.
Yeah. So passive should go on, of course, because I think 90% problem is really arising from that, the heating problem. That should go on. But I'm saying the remaining 10% also just become completely carbon neutral.
Last my point will be like tourist awareness. Really
This is, I think, is a very important point.
because any tourist coming here, they should be aware that they should keep their plastics and all. Because I have seen personally a lot of streams filled with plastic waste.
I agree with you. With
They go on the tops and
also itself, we had gone plastic picking up spree over here recently, on just a week back.
yeah.
It was beyond our capability
Yes.
to do it.
You can see in the Indus also. It's there.
And post-COVID, the surge of tourists, people who are coming over here and spoiling the environment. Awareness is a very important part of it. And I have seen Ladakh 10 years back also. And when you go to the forward areas in Pengongso and all, it used to be absolutely virgin, clean and all. Now you see the kind of setup which has come up over
The
there.
problem is there are more Indian tourists now. Indian tourists are more spoiled. I've got some tourists coming.
Somebody yesterday in my homestay who was thinking of setting up a hotel in Leh was telling me that Indian tourists want only one thing: television and markets.
And internet.
And internet.
Yeah, and
Nature is a second prize.
To shop.
I'm not realize only Pengongso में देख के क्या है, what are the uniqueness of that?
वो Instagram पे अपडेट किया होगा.
वो क्या होगा, 2 फोटो लिए होंगे सेल्फी, अदरवाइज सिटिंग इन द रूम, खाना पीना एंड गो बैक.
Awareness generation is good.
Okay, it's a bit difficult from the outside. I don't think there's really very much to add. One thing, my impression was that I think speed is of the essence. In the building sector, there's a lot of buildings being built, and if they are not built very well now, I don't know what the average lifetime of a building is here, but for the next, say, 30 years at least, these buildings will be not. So the sooner it happens, I mean, you said something like 10% in 2030. Yeah, so that would mean that the other 90% are still not
Are
good.
still bad.
And so you pile up a kind of legacy. Yeah? And so the other part is there are a lot of existing buildings, so probably as soon as possible we need to think about the refurbishment and how to improve the existing buildings. Or I think it was also said already, the lifestyle. I mean, if it gets known that it's many people live at 15 degrees in winter, everybody will want that. Yeah. Or I mean, if it's not allowed to use Bukara anymore, then you need to give an alternative. And this alternative.
So a combination of mandate and incentives will work. You should also mandate certain things will just not be allowed.
Some things need to be probably done
He
with
said a
pressure.
very pertinent point that the timelines will have to be little compressed. In the sense because with the UT and the government promoting, lot of players from outside would like to come and invest over here. And if it does not follow the norms what we are looking at, we'll have different kind of buildings.
The other important thing was already mentioned, the mobility. So we need to come away from fossil fuels and mobility. Of course, I don't think Ladakh will build up an automotive industry or anything like that, so it will be imports. But they need to be
You could incentivize the taxi operators. Actually. The taxi operators are the biggest users of it. You should incentivize
Also
them
with
to
tourism, they are working.
What I was thinking about in this context is probably what does carbon neutral Ladakh mean? Because if you import a car and that car is built with a very large carbon footprint somewhere else, do you count that or don't you count that? Yeah, so kind of define what is the boundary for
So
this.
there is an energy neutrality and there is a carbon neutrality. I think what we are really talking about here is energy neutral Ladakh. Because carbon neutral Ladakh will still take a lot longer.
in terms of, even in automobiles, in terms of emission levels, 10 to 15% goes in the production, 85% actually is non-fuel related. So, especially for transport operators, taxis, so then the ratio will be 5% in production and 95% actually in operation. So, I think as long as we can take care of the operational emission problem, that problem will be somewhat smaller. It will not be that serious. And then if you can actually also do afforestation and increase the tree cover, green cover, you can actually even calculate and say that okay, I become completely carbon neutral, including all the imports that take place into the country.
I was talking to somebody from Liechtenstein, professor, who was insisting on 100% renewable energy. And I said, make it 99, make it 99.9, but don't make it 100 because 100 certainly implies that you can't do many things which you can otherwise do. He disagreed, but
Yeah, you're right. Actually, 99%, not even 99%, near zero. Go 100%. What happens is that the last 10% requires huge capacities of energy storage, huge capacities in investments.
Now, some of the items of the committee wants to adopt
Vendors don't exist. Vendors don't exist. Many questions that my clients ask were, okay, if it goes bad, how much time will it take? When will they come? And the other one, essentially what he was mentioning is that the thermometer is 30-50
So my point was more just refurbishment because there are so many old buildings and then they have to be improved. And you have to reach the single people the refurbishment because new buildings maybe because then you need a law or standardization of new buildings. But this should be
Okay, may I have your kind attention, please, once again?
to other European places is that the construction that is above the
So,
is going to be 5 times, 6 times larger.
we now invite each of the tables.
In relative proportion, newer construction will save more compared to what we do with the
So, in about 2 minutes,
But if we want to prioritize and
this is the most active table. In about 2 minutes, we'll wind up, and then we will hear recommendations from each of the tables. So, you have 2 minutes to wind up.
इसको immediate wind up करना
season for 40 days it remains, like wetland maintenance, no evaporation of wetland maintenance. So this is more suitable to answer, but since these are cash crops and it's valid in the market, so they are doing it on the cost of their natural resources. Now there is a carbon footprint involved because you run so much of electricity in order to fetch this water. You run sometimes generators
Instead of that, there are ways of
Now tourism has been but I'm saying
Sorry, why I am so that's how I but see, in a decade, it is only
come up with something clean. We need to come up with something
I think this suggestion for the declaration about
So which table is ready?
points are a course in a university, a subsidy for a BPO family or mandatory etc.
Okay, can we
Like
now
you said,
move to
increase
others?
deforestation. I don't know how we could take a policy.
But that all is not
So,
just
so we'll invite this table to present their findings and recommendations. Sonam Durjit, can we record this when they're ready?
so they will be presenting here only.
So now each table will present its findings and others are free to interact. So it will be like a room-wide discussion. Yes, this table first. You can come here.
You both are colleagues. Which department?
No,
So, hello everyone. This is Tundu, and I'm a politician. So, what we discuss here is
excuse me,
number
they're
one.
presenting now their findings
Okay.
and recommendations.
So, I've drawn here something. First one is cement building, and the other side is money. So your building is bit small, and the money pillar is bit high. What we are going to tell you is when in this system, when we are going to construct something, suppose we propose 1 crore for a building, the actual estimate of a government department is 1 crore. The when the contractors go for a bidding, they keep their quotation below 30%, okay, and then maybe 10% commission, 20% their profit. So the building which is estimated to 1 crore is actually made for 40 lakhs. It's just the 40%. So 60% profit for contractors. And in this system and in this today's era, if something talks is more than human, non-living thing talks matter the most, which we call money. So when we give more benefit to contractors, these contractors always go for this cement buildings and all that. This is just a observation. So whenever we propose any building from the government side, there are least people of least amount of engineers in the departments who are really known to such techniques. So when engineers do not know such techniques, it is not very possible to construct such buildings in the administrative section. So that is why we have to, if we are going with the vision, with the planning, to construct such buildings in government department and all that, we must break this. And our recommendation is we must educate these civil engineers about this technique with collaboration with the government, and we must give more profit to the contractors, educate contractors about such technique. And if we do that, we feel that
this vision can be really implemented in very short time. Second thing, second recommendation from our team, Mr. Rohit, is we must look for this sustainable mobility. You know, this place is very famous for tourists, and to visit every site, they use vehicles. You know, they emit a lot of carbon by using diesel vehicles and petrol vehicles. So instead of that, if they look forward for an electric kind of vehicle, will be more easy to accomplish this carbon neutral Ladakh project. So third one, recommendation or suggestion from our group is we should go for a retrofitting system. So these three, okay. So last two, okay. Last one recommendation from our side is, like Hayal, there should be more construction company who are more specialized in making such buildings. So these are our recommendations. I hope it will be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there aren't any reactions, then we'll move to the next interview.
If I could add one more,
Yes.
I think a building code should be religiously followed by the construction companies, and it has to be implemented and decided by the government. Then you know where to go, what to follow. I think those are very important.
Thank you.
There's one question here. We discussed this on our table also, that we need engineers to be empowered, but we figured that the only way to do this was not through training or books, but by actually walking through a large number of such buildings. And they need to be able to knock at the wall, knock at the ceiling or whatever it is, and assure themselves that this will be pukta, this will work.
Right. But she said, more of the civil engineer, they only know how to use saria and cement, not the mud and the wood. So just for those project, I don't think so. They will invest more time to learn such things when they have the government job. So
So why don't we make it mandatory that you can't work in Ladakh on a government job as a civil engineer if you do not have so many hours of experience?
Yes, that is the point. Because I'm a builder and I know lots of civil engineers who really want to create such building, but and they are bind with the building codes, and also they are not very aware of what material, and at the end they don't want to take the risk by their own.
And the most unfortunate thing is that our newly independent government in India tried to create a level market so that the price of cement, let's say in Hyderabad, is the same as the price of cement in Jammu and Kashmir, when in fact it should be 3 times as much. And that Mahalana Boys and other such economists, I think, really ruined our economy when they got into that.
One thing, so in a way to mainstream such the technique of making passive solar-rated buildings. One way is to for government to encourage their buildings to be passive solar-rated, to create an example so that locals, people, private organizations, they can follow. Once they have examples to see, if government takes this step, that could be, if we can encourage government
Following by the army.
Yeah.
And I think there is a live example in my state also. Guru Jambeshwar University is a well-known name in Hisar. वहाँ पे भी एक बिल्डिंग इसी तरीके से बनी है, आज नहीं, आज से 5 साल पहले एग्जाम्पल है. बट जो उनका खुद का इंजीनियरिंग विंग है और वो गवर्नमेंट जॉब में ही है. माय गवर्नमेंट इज प्रमोटिंग ऑल दीज थिंग्स. और रिसेंटली अभी शायद 2-3 स्पेसिफिक प्रोजेक्ट्स के लिए इन सब चीज़ों के लिए ना कॉल आउट भी किया है. इट्स नॉट लाइक के सिर्फ यहीं हो रहा है, बाकी जगह भी हो रहा है.
Yes, this table. So I'll have a request that we have about 10 minutes to wind up. So the points that are covered by the earlier table, even if you have it, you can skip those.
So good morning everyone. I'm Satish Bhargav from EKI Energy Services Indore, and we are working in the carbon credits. And our table is brainstormed and generate some points to recommend to the Ladakh. First one is decentralize the power generation and install the solar PV at every household to consume their own needs of the electricity. And community-based ice stupa should be installed at the place where water is available, or stupa can be created. So these things, decentralized manner, we can happen, and it used for the communities. Right. The second point is to promote the organic farming and change the cultivation practices in tillage, pre and post tillage practices to reduce the SOx, NOx, and CO2 which is generated from the agriculture. So this is the point which is also can cover in agriculture practices to reduce the carbon footprint in the land. For urban infrastructure, construct and use the local material or construct the roads from the waste material like plastic and other materials which is available nowadays, which is manufactured from the waste to construct the roads in like a higher campus or villages where roads requirements. So this is the point. And the domestic waste management can adopt and use the landfill methanization techniques and generate the power generation from the heat which is extract from the methane and use to convert in the power and use for the communities or urban areas. The third recommendation is collect the organic waste from the households and wastewater, and collect the wastewater from the cities and the urban areas and the communities and treat it and use it as in a gardening or industrial purpose. So this also can reuse,
Rethink.
and another point is for the water. Install the micro hydropower plants or micro hydropower turbines in upstreams, which is coming from the mountains and used for the communities. And there is a high pH water is available, which is coming from the glaciers. So there's a strong possibilities to generate the green hydrogen, and they can use for many of purpose to resolve. So there's high possibilities to generate the hydrogen, green hydrogen, because the water is almost 9.5 above the 9.5 pH. For the transportation, include the e-bus, e-cars, and use and arrange the e-bikes at the public places, so the people who wants to travel for the shorter distances, they can use the e-bikes and the e-buses for the longer distance. These all are submission from our team, and my teammates' name is Lisa, Jonathan, Yatin, Rajesh, Anand Shukla, Kanish, and myself Satish.
Thank you. If everything has been covered at your table,
Yeah, just maybe one thing. The point on agriculture, I think it's important also to include reflection on the food system. What we see at the moment is more and more fields are left fallow, are not cultivated anymore, which shows that more and more food is being imported. And it seems difficult to build a carbon neutral economy if all the food is imported. The food has to be, of course, not 100%, but as much as possible, especially when you have such a energy efficient agricultural system and productive system, highly productive system as in Ladakh. The food has to be produced locally as much as possible. So just include this reflection maybe into the yeah, how to reach carbon neutrality.
Thank you. Okay. Which table would like to go next?
So our vision is doing more with less with local resources. मतलब हमारा इतना साइंटिफिक जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, हमें सिर्फ लोकल जो हमारे पूर्वज करते थे बस हमें उसी उन चीज़ों को मतलब फिर से रेप्लिकेट करना है, मतलब फिर से हमें उस चीज़ों पर ध्यान देना है। तो हमारा इसमें ये है कि पहले हम अभी यहाँ पर पैसिव सोलर हाउसिंग के बारे में बहुत मतलब हम चर्चे कर रहे हैं, बात कर रहे हैं, बट देन इन अ लोकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट मतलब मैं अपने गांव के बारे में बात करूँगी तो इतने लोगों को अवेयरनेस है क्या, तो वही अवेयरनेस जनरेशन इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। एंड अनदर थिंग इज इट सोलर वाटर हीटिंग जो हमारे घर सारे घरों में होता है, मतलब कि विच रिड्यूसेस द फ्यूल कॉस्ट इन हार्श क्लाइमेट लाइक लद्दाख। Another thing is to go back to our local toilets, मतलब local compost storage, which is very on the verge of extinction। And फिर हमारा जो दूसरा है कि इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल हो और चार्जिंग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर हो, या मतलब कि लोकल ट्रांसपोर्टेशन अभी वो भी ख़त्म हो गया है, मतलब पूरे विलेजेस में ये अभी लोकल ट्रांसपोर्टेशन है ही नहीं, मतलब बसेस चलती ही नहीं है, मतलब क्योंकि अभी सभी के घरों में दो दो व्हीकल्स है इसलिए। तो और दूसरा है कि वाटर मिल्स जैसे हमारा रंटक बोलते हैं जहाँ पर हमारा वीट मिल होता है, वो भी अभी ख़त्म हो रहा है। उसके वजह से हम उसके लिए सब्स्टिट्यूट में हम उसमें भी फ्यूल कंजप्शन बहुत ज़्यादा होता है। मतलब कि समराइज ऐसे करना चाहती हूँ कि हमें इतना कुछ ज़्यादा सोचने की ज़रूरत ही नहीं है, मतलब कि हमारे जो पूर्वज करते थे, हमारे जो अबिले मेमेले करते थे, दादा दादी करते थे, उसी को हमें फिर से दोहराना है, जो इतना ज़्यादा हमें कुछ क्रैक नहीं करना है। थैंक यू।
One more thing is just to, because we haven't talked about wind energy here, and there's a lot of.
Is he audible to that last statement?
So, another thing is there's a lot of wind energy potential here, and just at a 50-meter height of windmill and at a speed of 14 kilometer per hour, which is available in Ladakh, we could get a lot of electrical power generation here, which could augment the whole solar energy generation that we are talking about. So that could be one point that could be looked at. The south-facing side could be the solar side. The north-facing side, which does not receive sun, where we couldn't put much of solar panels or passive heating technologies. We could have windmills, couple of windmills there, not exactly at a scale of having a lot of windmills in a concentrated area, but having a 1.2 megawatt scale of windmill at one location, catering to one or two villages, that could help again in achieving what the vision for Ladakh would be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mostly we come on 4 to 5 points. Like first is, but it can't we can't say it is in policy or not, that increase afforestation in whole Ladakh region. Then second thing is that introduce course in universities like Hale and in University of Ladakh, like there should be some courses in passive solar, then renewable energy and other things, so that the students can easily know about this importance of passive solar buildings. Second, the thing is that it should do the mandatory for passive solar housing for government buildings, especially like locals will go, but the thing we should to make it mandatory, like it should be a law or something to force the government agencies to build all the buildings in passive solar. Then second thing that we should thought that there should be some subsidy for BPL families, below poverty line families, to build passive solar in their respective houses in remote villages, particularly in that areas where there is more like you can see cold, like in Zanskar, Dras, in Dang, Changtha, and all that areas. So yeah, we thought all other covered in other groups. I think that we thought that we could introduce. Yeah, we can say it should be like this from our group.
If anybody on the table wants to add to that, you're welcome. Thank you. Which is the next table? Yes.
मैं मोस्टली पॉइंट्स कवर हो गए हैं. एक इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स के रिगार्डिंग काफ़ी एक चीज़ कवर हो रही है. इसके रिगार्डिंग सिर्फ इतना ही कहना चाहूँगा कि आई थिंक आई एम ऑडिबल विदाउट दिस इवन. इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स के रिगार्डिंग एक ही बात कहना चाहूँगा कि दिस इज अ सीरियस इशू. वन पॉजिटिव साइड, देयर इज नो pollution, and one negative side, consumption. So one has to consider that. और इस पे इसी रिगार्डिंग मेरा जॉब के अलावा मेरा एक वॉलंटियर प्रोफाइल है जो मैं एज ए रिसर्चर काम कर रहा हूँ. मेरे और मेरी टीम में हम 7 लोग हैं. नाउ वी हैव डेवलप्ड अ मैग्नेटिक इंजन, इसके भी हम टेस्टिंग कर रहे हैं ऑटोमोबाइल्स के लिए. लेकिन वो कोल्ड रीजन के लिए काफ़ी इफेक्टिव हैं, बाकी रीजन्स के लिए नहीं है. तो वी आर ट्राइंग टू बिल्ड अ प्रॉपर वेयर यू डोंट नीड एनी फ्यूल that can be used as a generator, that can be used as an engine in a vehicle, in a bicycle. और ये आज हमने नया नहीं बनाया, ये बहुत पहले भी था. एंशिएंट टेक्नोलॉजी में सब कुछ है, हमारी वैदिक साइंस में सब कुछ है, बस हमें उसको स्टडी करके उसे वापस इम्प्लांट करना. तो इस टेबल का सिर्फ एक यही है. इन फ्यूचर आई डोंट नो हाउ मच टाइम विल टेक, मे बी 2 year और 3 year. और जो विंडमिल का अल्टरनेट हमारी टीम ने ढूंढा है वो है हॉरिजॉन्टल विंडमिल मैकेनिकल ड्राइव्स, एंड दैट इज फार मोर इफेक्टिव, अप टू 65 kilowatt that can generate, and you can put that on any high rise building. और यहाँ के लिए काफ़ी इफेक्टिव सॉल्यूशंस हैं. ऑफ कोर्स ये सब चीज़ें ECBC कोड इन चीज़ों में कवर नहीं होती, आउट ऑफ बॉक्स चीज़ें हैं और इन चीज़ों को कोई भी कवर करना चाहता भी नहीं. यहाँ आके एक चीज़ तो ये समझ में आई, डोंट थिंक कि भी कोई कवर कर रहा है नहीं कर रहा. यू कीप ऑन ट्राइंग, यू बिल्ड इट, यू प्रोड्यूस बिफोर द सोसाइटी. once one day there will be a set. This is from thank you.
Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Ladakh for giving me opportunity to work here and seeing this beautiful place. So, first of all, I would like to give answers to the questions from Mary Table, like what are the government initiatives here for the making mandatory requirements for making building energy efficient. So there is a policy, as sir was saying, that Energy Conservation Building Code and Equal Vasanta, and which was initially drafted by Bureau of Energy Efficiency and the Ages of Energy Conservation Act 2001. And here, Power Development Department in support with the Energy and Resources Institute is on the verge of notification of this code. So the beauty of this code is that it prescribes the minimum energy efficiency standards for making commercial or residential buildings energy efficient. So what we can do is that we can incorporate our local materials if they are energy efficient. Because the code does not prescribe that you have to use this kind of building material, you have to use this kind of heating system. So only prescribed values, scientific values are given. So we have the opportunity that if we are doing any kind of research like sir was talking about passive solar heating buildings. So whatever the comments and suggestions we received from here, we already have submitted to the High Level Building Energy Efficiency Committee in EUT Ladakh. In High Level Building Energy Efficiency Committee, all the secretaries, administrative secretaries are there. So whatever the discussion we are doing here today, so once the code is going to be notified and all the recommendations are included in this book, so that will be more validating and it would be on actual ground. And once the code is notified, all the commercial buildings having connected load of 30 kilowatts and contract demand of 36 kVA have mandatorily follow the rules and provisions of this code. So that notification is very important for all of us, and all of your comments and suggestions, positive comments and suggestions, I would say, we have to incorporate in that. And on personal level, I am agree with that table, especially with that ma'am. Initially, whatever human beings, how human beings is going to sustain in a local environment, that is the best coordination between human beings and nature. But yes, we have to go on advanced stage, and we have to be the part of technology. So we are doing all these things. Thank you so much.
So that's some good news there. That already work is in progress. Yes. So last but not the least, I hope you still have some points left.
Yeah, yeah. So most of the points are already covered.
One second.
So in that, are we also covering something for the existing buildings, for example, retrofitting them with solar-based heat pump systems? Because this passive solar heating we are considering primarily for the new buildings. So something like solar-based heat pump system, are we
Yes, sir,
considering?
there is provision for that, for incorporation of that. And suppose we have put the limit to 30 kilowatt now. So if the existing building, suppose you are having an existing building, and you want some kind of alteration, and your alteration is when you do the alteration, that connected load is exceeding the prescribed limit, then you have to incorporate the provisions of the code in your alterated buildings. So this is the, and you were saying like अपन सोलर वगैरह incorporate कर सकते हैं कि नहीं, तो उसमें एक पैरामीटर है इलेक्ट्रिकल एंड रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी सिस्टम्स का, उसमें प्रोविजंस है कि on 25% of roof area we can keep उसको हम फिक्स रख सकते हैं रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी टेक्निक्स के लिए, या फिर जितना भी आपका 1%, जितना भी टोटल डिमांड है उसका 1% हम सोलर या फिर विंड या फिर दूसरे रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी टेक्निक्स से उसको सप्लाई कर सकते हैं.
This is mandated or optional?
No, sir. This is renewable energy techniques is after the code notified will be mandated, sir.
But 36